Hi, this is the reality of AI in 2025. There's an awful lot of hype, there's a little bit of fear, but there's an awful lot of noise as well. And today, I want to cut through some of that noise for you. I know that some of you in the room might have some skepticism about AI. I do know that some of you are already employing it day to day in your operations really successfully. I think a lot of you will be somewhere in the middle, having experimented a little bit with some success, maybe with a little bit of ChatGPT and other tools. And I suspect that several of you are caught in what I like to call the phase of random acts of productivity. So for those of you already actively using AI today, I'm hoping that you'll come away with maybe one new idea or initiative at least that you can try and take back to your department next week or next month. For those of you a lot earlier in the journey, I hope you'll leave with the confidence to be able to take something back to start trying and seeing if it can start to move the needle for you. The first thing I want to say is it's not actually that new. The term was first coined in the 1950s, would you believe? And actually, for around the last 2 decades, including in the fire service, it's been present in a lot of the systems you're already using in hardware and software. We heard from Motorola earlier in your CAD systems. Machine learning, which is a subset of AI, has actually been around a long time. What is a lot newer and seemingly making it everywhere at the moment is the birth of the natural language models like ChatGPT that came out in late 2022, which kind of exploded. And the big deal there was it enabled every individual to be able to interact directly with the AI in a very natural way. ChatGPT was probably the most famous version, but there's now a proliferation of tools that are very, very accessible for very, very low cost. And that's the kind of tools we're going to be talking about today. This has already been mentioned just now, this phrase, but the truth is tech developments are moving at a very fast pace. There are many problems that AI can solve, but there is a lot of hype around about it. And the promises don't always match up to the reality. So it's really important that we are clear in our expectations about what AI can do. That said, it is already transforming our work and our lives, and it has the potential to do much, much more. But here's the thing, it's not actually about technology, it is always about people. Because you can have the most sophisticated tech stack in the world, but if your people aren't seeing or getting the benefit of it, it's redundant. I'm not going to bombard you today with a load of tech talk, but I'm going to show you how it can help you and your department in tangible, accessible ways. The key is being deliberate and strategic so that you see real-world outcomes. So let's talk about the why. I largely work with mission-driven leaders across different sectors. And when I guide them through assessing AI opportunities, there are 3 principles I always focus on from the beginning. The first goes back to the idea this is really all about people. AI should add to, improve what we do as humans, with us firmly in the driving seat. For all the exciting talk of automation, at its best, it's not about replacing people, as was said earlier, it's always about empowering them. A huge area of potential for AI is to aid us in our decision-making. One of the core elements of a leader's job is to make decisions, all sorts of decisions every day. For you as fire service leaders, these decisions are absolutely critical. Your human judgment is your superpower, and it always will be the case. But imagine if your brain had instant access to a wealth of historical data it could retrieve and analyze in a matter of seconds to help you make a call. That's what augmented decision-making looks like using AI. And now I want to share a brief video clip from one of your own, Chief Dan Munsey, with an amazing project he's involved with, which just shows where this could be headed. Could you cue the video, please?
The Western Fire Chiefs Association, with support from NASA, is completing the first phase of a fire command decision-making model, with a framework inspired by decision science and military best practices, and led by firefighters. It will allow us to systematically analyze our decision cycles.
But what I'm excited for is the promise of artificial intelligence in the future, which is not only going to leverage our experience that we've got in the past, but really all of those that have come before us. And it's going to be able to scan a landscape of thousands of other fires that are similar and start providing that incident commander or that firefighter decision points or information that they can then translate into better actions in the firefighting.
Thank you, Chief Munsey, for sharing that with us. Probably the most commonly quoted benefit of AI is it saves time. And it's very true that done well, emphasis on done well, it can create massive efficiencies and save a ton of time on, for example, admin tasks. And we'll go into more detail on that shortly. But just focusing on time saving alone only gets us so far. What I always encourage leaders to think about when it comes to their AI strategy is to look at the outcomes you want to achieve or improve upon. If an AI initiative isn't aligned with a measurable outcome, it could just be a distraction or even lead to wasted budget, which nobody wants. Here are some areas of mission impact that you might want to look at when evaluating AI tools, ideas, or proposals. The top 4 are internal measures: operational, risk, resources, training, all measurable in their own right. But when you start to move the needle on one or more of these, they directly impact the external middle 3, which are all about the community you serve, like survival rates, care experience, community interaction. Obviously, adapt this for your own departments. But every single one should drive better financial performance for your department too. One example I came across that exemplifies this really well is from an adjacent sector of healthcare. Unity Health in Toronto created a clinician-led initiative building an AI-powered early warning system. What they were aiming to do is reduce mortality for inpatients. They worked across departments and they trained the system on 20,000 patient records and looked for indicators that could actually help predict earlier should they be able to use AI to analyze it. Over an 18-month pilot period, this was the top-line result: 26% reduction in hospitalized patient deaths. That was the top-line metric, but actually on the way, they achieved these impact areas too. So they had shorter ICU stays, better allocation of nurses, so they hit that resource optimization. They had early involvement of palliative care, which was reducing risk. And they had better communication with patients and their families about prognosis and care, because they had that much more predictability. And overall, economic performance improved too. They now roll out an AI academy to help other healthcare institutions, which is exemplary. The final principle is around making sure your deployment of AI is safe for you, your people, and your community. Your teams trust their SCBAs because the functionality is visible. AI tools also need a certain level of visibility. We've probably all heard of the black box syndrome. Now, this doesn't mean you need to be an expert in algorithms, obviously, but you do want to know why and how AI is coming up with the results that it is. So, trusted vendors will be able to share with you how they're using AI. We saw that from First Due. They'll be able to tell you exactly how it's being employed, and importantly, how your data is being held and processed. Always be able to ask your vendors that, and good vendors will be able to explain. You don't want any black box stuff with all the kind of private data that you're going in there. It's also important to be transparent about the use of AI with your team and vice versa, and I talk to a lot of leaders about this. Could I get a quick show of hands? Who's got an AI usage policy for their department? Okay, there's a few hands. This is something that I really, really do recommend. I'm going to go into that a little bit later. Finally, in your roles, you'll know this more than most. You remain in control as the human leader, always. So let's look at how you can start to get AI working for you and your people, or further develop your AI efforts to be as effective as possible. I'm going to start with some super simple examples, and then I'm going to build from there. Could I get a quick show of hands again? Who joined the fire service to sit at a desk staring for hours on end at a screen? Not as many takers, okay. Well, for those of you already using AI, admin is likely the area you started with, which makes so much sense. The more we can free up you and your people's time to do the human work, the better. And the most obvious places to start are those parts of the job that are repetitive, time-consuming, staring at a screen, or involving huge amounts of information. And this is where AI really excels at doing the heavy lifting. We've already heard from First Due that incident reporting can be massively sped up by having AI interpret audio and automate a lot of incident reports. I know this is something being rolled out successfully, and it's a great use of the tech. Now, as well as audio, AI is getting now really good at interpreting images as well, which I think has got huge potential. So this is a very crude example, but I understand there are likely to be incidents that your people attend where the only way to record the scene is actually by scribbling notes down somewhere, maybe because of the noise or for sensitivity reasons. I did a little experiment for demonstration purposes. I mocked up a very hastily written note for a potential incident. I used abbreviations. I deliberately didn't write too neatly. I took a picture of the note with my phone, and I uploaded it directly to ChatGPT. And I asked it to write me an incident narrative. a slow typer. This is in real time. Now, I've double-checked this, and it did a pretty good job, despite kind of, slightly dodgy handwriting. Image processing also means there's lots of potential for its use in inspections, for example. Imagine being able to have a junior take photos of around a building and have AI take a first pass at potential violations, for example, that you can then check out. I just think the possibilities, and we can start to talk about video and glasses, but I won't go too far there, but there is tons of potential with image processing. I understand that you've got a lot of compliance to comply with. There's a lot of policies, there's a lot of documents, a lot of regulation that you have to wrangle. They also look pretty painful, some of those long documents. This is another area where AI can really, really help out. When one of your team, say, is needing to check whether a certain decision or action is compliant with your SOP, your union agreement, or new regulations of any sort, the last thing they want to be doing is trawling through pages and pages of a document. There is a better way now. So this is a tool from Google called NotebookLM. It's actually free to use. What it allows you to do is create a notebook containing lengthy documents that you can interrogate. So here I've uploaded a SOP. It's 241 pages, publicly available. Everything I've got up here is publicly available information, of course. And I'm asking it about mandatory overtime. It's trawled through in a matter of seconds. Again, this is real time. It's come back with every mention that could be relevant to mandatory overtime policy. The neat thing as well is with every reference, I can click and go straight to that particular part of the policy, so you can verify the information and make sure it's not hallucinating. You've probably heard that term about AI. The great thing about this as well is if you were to create a notebook for your particular department, you can actually have multiple documents within the same notebook, and it can cross-reference. So, okay, this is what our SOP says, but actually we've got a new union agreement. Can you bring all the information? And the last thing I say about this tool, fun fact, I wouldn't do it necessarily with an SOP, but you can actually create like a podcast summarizing with two hosts talking about the document. You may want to do it with something slightly less dry. But say, for example, if you've got a new research paper that you want to kind of see what the main points are, you can actually create an audio overview, put it in your car as you're driving, you can kind of learn it that way. So communications is a very tangible use cases for AI, which I know some of you will have already done a lot of. There's some real quick wins here. So I've spoken to one chief, for example, who used AI to help draft a policy, for example. Another department who used it for translating community comms in different languages. You can have AI check your work. You can have it edit. What it's really good at doing is repurposing content. So another concrete example. By the way, I didn't do these live because I thought it would be nice. So they're all pre-recorded screen recordings, but they are in real time. So say you've got a fire safety week or fire prevention week, depending on where you're based, coming up. Say you're focusing on the main topic is going to be home smoke alarms. You've got different audiences and contexts to speak to in the community. So here I use a tool called Claude. I'm telling it I need 3 types of content. I'm saying I'm not giving it a ton of detail. I've said I want press release, I want social media content, and a school presentation, an elementary school presentation. This is real time. And all I've said is, change them every 10 years, alarm in every bedroom, and you can see what it's come up with. Pretty detailed, right? You can obviously give it a lot more prompting and tailor that for your particular department. At the end, it will actually ask, would you like this more tailored and ask for more? But you can see it's actually done a pretty good job of creating slides in kind of, easy to understand for children, be a smoke detector hero. You've got social media. I just said social media, but it's come up with Twitter, with TikTok, with Instagram, with LinkedIn. And all tailored for those different contexts and in the kind of the right language for those. And then, of course, you've got your press release. So there are some of the more kind of tactical use cases, but I had a bit of a personal breakthrough with my own AI use when I realized I could start to treat it as a strategic partner. Now, I think for leaders, this could be a game changer. So I talked earlier about augmented decision-making, and we saw the incredible opportunity from Chief Dan Munsey. And once you're getting results on the admin front, you can start to look at other areas where it can really start to move the needle for you. Because AI is good at processing massive amounts of data in seconds, it can be a great assistant for strategic planning. You can think about it like having a very smart, very fast researcher who can go back and look at patterns and make recommendations, say for equipment, for scheduling, resource management. Again, I'm going to bring an example now. I'll share how it would work. So I created a spreadsheet, a dummy spreadsheet, of a year's worth of potential incident log data for, say, a mid-sized fire department. I did check this with Fairfax County Chief, who's signed it off for me as being slightly, hopefully realistic. But I have a year's worth of data. I've got 400 incidents, and this is all the kind of data you could log. I then run it through AI, and I asked it what patterns and trends it could pick out to help with resourcing planning. And this is what I came up with. So it's picked out major trends. It's also made recommendations as the back of it. It will always do more than you ask it to do, and you have to be very specific about the prompting. I gave it a pretty open prompt. I let it kind of just run at it. But you can imagine with very careful prompting, with it telling it exactly what you need, how you could start to work with it as an assistant, basically kind of beside you, helping you plan. You'd obviously tailor this, you check its work, but you can see what's possible. So from a conversation with several chiefs, I understand that training and certification is absolutely crucial to your success, of course, as a department, but also that it can be quite repetitive and it can be quite onerous. Now, I know there's some really amazing things going on with AR and VR. I'm not going to talk about that kind of training augmentation right now, but there are actually some very simple ways you can raise your training up a level by using simple AI tools. Again, let's look at a simple example. If we take one area of NFPA required training, for example, let's see if we can get AI to come up with different ways to help learning. In this case, I'm using a tool called Gemini by Google. And I'm asking it to create different scenarios for auto-extrication. Again, real time. I'll let you be the judge of how helpful this would be, but again, you can give it a lot more instruction than I did. Of course, you can go way into the detail with this, but just think about the scale of what you could be doing. You could also get it to actually be tracking completion rates for training. Think about different learning styles. Think of different formats. You can use it as a creative partner as well to kind of come up with new scenarios each time to keep things fresh. And it's far easier for people to retain information if you're obviously keeping training fresh. It's just an extra aid to that. So everything I just showed you was done on tools that cost from $0 to $20 a month. So some AI features could already be embedded in systems you're already using, such as Microsoft or Google. I've included a list of common accessible tools in the pilot toolkit, which I will make available after the conference, or post this talk anyway. So you can download that later, and I've got a bit of a glossary of the simple tools and the potential use cases. I should stress, though, that for any sensitive data that should not be in the public domain, ensure you have a paid, secure account for these tools. The free versions don't have the necessary data privacy controls. But in the example of the comms for fire safety, for example, I mean, that you're OK in a free tool, but just be wary of what you put in there and anything free. So we've seen some of what can be done with off-the-shelf solutions, but we're now increasingly able to create and adapt AI tools for very specific use cases, which can become very powerful leadership aids. From both experience as a leader myself and now working with leaders, I know that it can feel very lonely at the top. In your roles, you've got an incredible amount of pressure on you in terms of making decisions, the tough calls, looking after your people, and everything else your job entails. And whilst there's no replacement for human connection, there are several ways in which AI can support you personally as a leader. This is an example of this is called a custom GPT. I built when they first came out in November 2023. I did it as an experiment. So what a custom GPT does, enable you to give very specific instructions on how you want it to behave. You train it on particular data rather than that open chat box, which I call firing up the whole brain every time. It interacts with you with the most consistent results faster when you have a very specific job you give it to do. So in this example, I wanted to create a light leadership support coach. So I trained it tool on leadership thought leaders I admired, the likes of Brené Brown and Simon Sinek in my case, and the types of scenarios it should help with. So this includes helping with brainstorming ideas. But the most powerful use case I found as I built these out for more leaders was actually prepping for challenging meetings. You can input who it's with, what the situation is. It can be quite anxiety-inducing if you're coming into a meeting where you don't really know what the reaction of the person's going to be and how you can handle that. You can actually role-play that situation. So you can go into that meeting with a little bit more confidence and an idea of how it might pan out. And that's actually been one of the strongest use cases for one of these. And obviously, you tailor them. Then you can really get personalized. So you can train a tool on your own writing style and expertise. This is something I built for a client of mine to help him quickly draft up comms and prep for meetings. And it's tailored to fit the particular scenario he needs right there and then. But I've trained it on his own tone of voice, his role, what he stands for. So it understands him as soon as he goes into the tool. It's not just that general interface where you had to start from scratch and do a lot of prompting. He's already a lot of the way there. Could I just ask how many of you need to apply for grants or are involved with fundraising at all in your role? Okay, quite a few. So again, different sector. I work with a number of charities. But an interesting example I thought might be good for you is I work with the CEO of a charity helping vulnerable adults with life skills for independent living. She came to me one day saying her executive assistant has resigned. She wanted to replace the role, but she was interested to know what tasks could be done by AI so that she could broaden the next person's remit to help the rest of her leadership team who are quite stressed out. When I looked into it, it turned out about 50% of this assistant's role was actually spent doing fundraising admin, so researching grants, seeing what they might be eligible for, drafting up comms and drafting the actual applications themselves. So I built them a fundraising assistant, and I trained it on their mission, their values, previous successful grant applications, even the CEO's tone of voice. They've now saved 18 of 20 hours a week on that work, and she was able to reallocate that role to actually help our leadership team for a lot better sanity across the team. So I mentioned at the beginning the concept of random acts of productivity. Let's talk about the realities of setting you and your department up for success in a sustained way. I talked about hype right at the outset. Is anyone familiar with this graph on the tech adoption hype cycle? I'll go really briefly on this one because I'm looking at the time now. But there is a kind of cycle that tech adoption goes through, everything from the internet to mobile phones, and we're really in the midst of that now with AI. There's the kind of, it could be magic, the silver bullet moment that we have, and then the trough of disillusionment, we realize sometimes the AI lies to us and it fails and it's letting us down, and then eventually you get to kind of a productivity place with it. And I think with AI, people tend to go through this roller coaster a few times. But with a deliberate strategic approach, you should be able to avoid too much of that. So just going to go quickly now through some fundamentals that are crucial to bear in mind to ensure good foundations are there from the start. And the first is our old friend data. So where data privacy is concerned, don't put anything sensitive into a free tool. Ensure you've got a paid account with model training turned off, government-specific version, or a locally hosted tool that's been approved by IT. Ask your vendors about where AI is embedded in their platforms or kit. And then make sure you've got a strong foundation. You've heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. Where data is concerned and AI applies 100-fold. I also advise every department and agency to draw up even a simple policy of AI usage, even if it's just a one-page guidance. Identify the tools you're comfortable with. Find out what your people are already using. Bring your own AI to work as a reality. And then make sure that everyone communicates about what's safe to use in what context. Having guardrails actually helps people feel psychologically safe in their department's use of AI, as well as their own. Transparency strengthens trust on both sides. The final fundamental is a very human problem. I've seen people, really smart people, get so seduced by these very convincing chatbots that they start to develop a dependence which actually can become unhelpful in terms of thinking. I've got a rule of thumb. If you're embarking on any initiative that requires critical thinking or creativity, start with your own thinking first, then work with the AI. Because there's a confirmation bias that happens once you ask a question to AI because of the way they interact with us, they want to please. It can be very seductive. Finally, with any AI initiative, small or large scale, as I said at the outset, I would make sure you're clear on what outcomes, not just what outputs you are aiming to achieve. It shouldn't just be about doing more, it should be about doing better. So you recall we covered some of these key areas of impact at the beginning. These are just some example metrics of what you could put against them, but obviously you'd make these your own, what works for your department. So whether AI is relatively new to you or whether there's a new use case you'd like to try, I've got a super simple framework that I suggest for getting started, and there will be a more comprehensive one that you'll be able to get hold of later on. So first, start with the problem you're trying to solve. So it's not about starting with the shiny new tool, it's the problem you're trying to solve, like a task that's slowing your team down or eating up too much time. Keep your pilot manageable according to your resources, but meaningful enough that you can see if it moves the needle. Bring the right people in early. If data and systems are involved, connect with someone who knows your information flow, likely your IT team. And involve one or more members of your team that's doing the work day to day if you can. Get a bit of a task force together. Benchmarking, measuring, I can't stress this enough. Make sure you know what success you're looking to see, what metrics you're actually measuring, but also where you're starting from. Then always share what you learn. You should gain insights from any pilot. And don't just share within your department. I'd encourage you to share with each other. I know there's some very great collaborative task forces that are happening in the service. Do that with AI learning. Set up groups. I'm in an incredibly proactive group called AI in the NHS, for National Health Service in the UK. And there are multiple chats of sharing what pilots and tools that they're finding and kind of philosophizing about everything, about safety. And they're learning so much faster because they're actually sharing this information. If you take away just one thing from me today, please let it be this. You cannot outsource your thinking, your judgment, or your humanity to AI. But harnessed correctly, it can be a positive force for all three. Thank you very much.